In this episode, we talk about the 2023 World Beatbox Championship.
Some of these men would not be in the battles if those women were in a mixed category with them.
What was great,
Just plainly obvious that every single beatboxer felt supported and loved.
what could be improved,
That professional element, I think, is really important, and which is why I was sad that it wasn't there at the World Champs.
and what it means for the future of beatbox.
These are conversations that should be happening, and organizers need to be creating that space.
Alright, hey everyone, Justin back, and this round we have Tani Levitt. So Tani Levitt, could you explain a little bit about who you are, give a little introduction?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a journalist from the United States. I was in New York City. Now I'm in Washington, D.C. I write and report and make podcasts about all sorts of things, but mainly sports and music. And as it relates to music, I'd say the majority of that coverage is about beatbox. I got into beatbox just as I was starting to do the whole journalism thing, and I went looking for someone to explain it to me. You know, who are these people? How did this American thing make its way to Europe and across the world? And, you know, how does a person find these things? All that kind of stuff. And really the only media there was at the time in 2018 was like shout out videos, battle videos, and tutorials. And like, tutorials are good if you want to become a beatboxer, but I never wanted to become a beatboxer. I wanted to learn about the art. I wanted to kind of see meta criticism, you know, coverage, that kind of stuff. And that wasn't there. So as I was looking for stuff to do as a new journalist, you know, I just kind of started doing beatbox.
Wow, that's a very interesting kind of point of view that you're coming into the beatbox community, not as a beatboxer, but primarily more an observer, journalist, kind of looking at how the art has been moving along all these years. Could you describe this World Champs in a single sentence?
Yeah, I mean, I think this new World Champs was super ambitious, super duper ambitious. And you could see that in a number of ways. You could see that in the two new categories, vocal scratch and sound effect. He also added a Beatbox Expo, which was almost like not a career fair, but like an industry fair for beatboxing. And it wasn't so big. There were only a few people who got tables, but I think it's a really good idea. The Beatbox Expo was brand new. And he broke the event into two parts. One was at a much, much smaller venue where he had the solo limbs and the expo, and then a much, much bigger event for the battles, venue for the battles. And I think in all those ways, it was really ambitious. I mean, it was a 6-day event that, you know, I think all of that kind of lives up to the idea of a world championship. The scope of what Bilo and Beatbox Battle TV were trying to do, I think, matched the ambition and grandeur that is implied by the title of the event. Yeah.
For, I guess, kind of the hot question, right? You've been to GBB 2021 and you've been to World Champs last week. So how would you compare both of these events?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different. Obviously, you know, at GBB 2021, Swiss Beatbox was forced to host the event in a bigger venue than they would have wanted to comply with some COVID guidelines. They had somewhere between like 2,000 and 3,000 people there over the course of the weekend, but the venue fit 5. And that cavernous space was hard on the sound. You know, ask any beatboxer who is at both GBB 2021 and GBB 2019, they'll tell you that 2019, that was the best sound they've ever had. And that was a much more intimate, warm sounding room. The Beatbox, you know, Battle World Champs that just happened this week, it had 2 different venues, which actually I think was really cool. The first one was much, much smaller, and basically, like Bilo said, like, I didn't advertise this venue to anybody except for beatboxers. So like, if you're here, you're a beatboxer's beatboxer, you're, you know, part of the culture, that kind of thing. I don't love the idea of kind of closing off beatbox in that way, but it did provide an intimate space. The sound there wasn't great. And people were, some of the battlers were like pretty unhappy about how that manifested in their elims, but ultimately, like, it was cool. The main venue was really, really great. That is a really, really solid venue. They had issues with sound, but the sound was still really good. And I thought it was a really good size. The concert hall at Huxley's Neuvelt, where they held the battles, capacity is 1,600. I'd say like at its biggest, this event was closer to 1,000 people, but like it was a really nice space. The stage was awesome. The stage was really, really great. Backstage area was, I'd say, the right size for battlers. Like at the backstage at GBB, like it was just like this weird big area, almost like exactly the same size as like what people in the crowd saw, and it was just like more like empty cavernous space, which like not great for the sound. I think having the event lodging, the official lodging, be a hostel and not a hotel was good. The main GBB lodging area was a 5-star hotel that for many people that was expensive, and then they were like getting Airbnbs, and still people got Airbnbs at World Champs, but I mean it was 30 euros a night for a room at this hostel. That's like about a fourth of what it cost me at GBB. That kind of accessibility is really great, and also at the hostel you've got 5 to 10 people in a room. That that also creates kind of community. I thought that was good. The thing that most struck me as a difference, though, was just in terms of like the organizational philosophy towards what event should and shouldn't look like. At GBB, you noticed Poponi never got on the mic until the award ceremony. He had Scott Jackson. Bilo hosted almost everything. And beyond that, like Bilo did a lot of speaking, and Scott Jackson, shout out to North America. His hosting style is very like, okay, I'm going to say a couple things, make sure people are here, and then get going. There was at GBB, it felt like a real focus was to make it feel like a music festival, to be like, we have a schedule, we're going to meet it. We have this, and then we're going to do this, and here's our scheduled break. And for the most part, things went according to schedule. Once you're in the crowd, things were fairly as expected. Whereas at the World Champs, it was like things happened randomly. Like 2 nights at the main venue, Bilo just announced that like, well, we didn't book the venue for this hour that we were using. So I'm going to have to pay like 2,000 more euro for this hour. So it's really important that everybody get out by 12:59. And yeah, like it was just, he said that out loud. And what it led to was, a feeling that like Swiss Beatbox was very corporate, very, very corporate. And I think that's by design, that like they've built their brand on quote unquote production value.
Yeah.
Quote unquote production value. And I think they've delivered on a lot of that. I think a lot of the quote unquote production value from Swiss Beatbox, though, has been like a bit papering over like holes and things that weren't going right. Beatbox Battle Television and their event, like, very purposefully wanted you to see the flaws. They wanted it to be human. They wanted it to be community. They didn't want people to think that this event was anything other than a community get together. I think there's a happy medium in between both of these things that neither of them have yet to meet. Bilo really could have used just less talking and more like focusing on hosting a good event. The GBB 2021 could have done anything to show that they cared about people. They did nothing to show that they cared about people in the crowd, people on the stage, people in the community. All that we saw at GBB 2021 was a commitment to like a really, really good YouTube product. And so, that's not great either. They could have remembered that this is a community. I think this week could have remembered that like a decent amount of professionalism is healthy. Considering that for many people, beatboxing is a profession and that this is a really important event. I felt confused that Bilo would regularly say like, this isn't about money, this isn't about money, but that this could change your life. I said that earlier and I say it again. I was talking to Elias Eon from MOM, and he was saying, I've won GBB. They just won World Champs. The things that make it possible for the MOM guys to perform to crowds that aren't at beatbox battles almost entirely disconnected from the things that they've won as beatboxers. What makes it possible for them to perform is they're unbearably funny, stage
Yeah.
presence. They're performers. They work on this. They worked on that busking. Like ask any of those three guys. The things that make them successful off of the stage or off of a beatboxer stage. And it was enough to just like have a stage, have a mic, have a microphone sponsor. Those things were like unheard of at the time. But it's 2023 and we're a decade into beatbox having an audience. We're 7 years into beatbox having a huge international audience. This is a community of millions, millions. And to think that 1,000 people for the world champs, a community of millions, is enough to serve them community feel, I'm not sure that's enough anymore. Um, you know, Bilo and his team, they're really still connected to the old school, and I love that. But like with all due respect, like nobody's meeting up on the corner in the Bronx to beatbox anymore. That is history that people should know, but that's not lived reality anymore.
Mm.
And so, in that sense, I think both those events were missing key parts of what beatbox is in 2023. Poponi missed that community element. Bilo missed that professional element. And I don't think people in the crowd are thinking about this way, and I don't think they should. I don't think it's, if you're a fan, I don't think it's your job to say like, well, you know, is Poponi doing enough to help people get record deals? Is Bilo doing enough to help people market themselves? I'm not sure that you as a fan need to worry about that. But me as someone who thinks about and writes about the macro level, like trends and realities of beatbox, that's what I think about. Um, and I think it's really important that I should say, really important for beatboxers specifically, that the biggest events in the community actually serve their needs. And right now, some of their needs are not being met by either of those two of the biggest organizations, biggest events in the world. There still needs to be that community feel. But there also needs to be an attention to like, what do these beatboxers want to do with their career? I asked a lot of people that this week, and most of them, even, I'm not talking about anybody in particular right now, but bad beatboxers, even bad beatboxers, right, at this event wanted to make beatbox their career. And I think that's good. But like, when I asked them, then, well, what does that look like for you? They don't know. And so that professional element, I think, is really important, and which is why I was sad that it wasn't there at the World Champs. But with that said, on a personal level, it was just plainly obvious that every single beatboxer felt supported and loved by Beatbox Battle TV, Bilo, and all his team. And so there's a balance to those things.
Yeah. So how would you compare the level of beatboxing from this World Champs to GBB 21, perhaps, or even the previous World Champs?
It's a really good question. It's hard to compare because there's so much more. Like they're specifically drawing on a different pool and drawing on talent in different ways. The only way basically to get into GBB is to win a wild card. If you are invited to GBB without winning a wild card, it's because you already made it last year. You were at the previous GBB and you did well, and chances are you won a wild card that time, right? Like, so there's the only way to win a spot at GBB basically is to win a wild card. That's really hard, and you're competing against the world, right? When you do a wild card, but at the World Champs, you just got to win your national championship. There are some people who didn't, but for the vast majority, you win your national championship. And with all due respect to every country in the world, like the American Beatbox Championship is, along with France, the deepest and most competitive world champ in the world. When I tell you that the 20th ranked beatboxer in the United States was better than many of the people doing showcase eliminations at the World Champs, I mean that with no disrespect. I just mean that to say that the depth of talent from country to country is not the same. There are a lot of beatboxers in America who could have done really nicely on the stage and were nowhere near close because, I mean, think about Ballistics. How many times has he done really good things on the international stage? Bro's never made the finals in America.
Mm-hmm.
Never. That's a really good beatboxer, really technical beatboxer, technically much better than a lot of people who are on the stage. And I mean that as no disrespect to them. That's just factual. And so in that way, I don't think the world champs and the GBB are even trying to do the same thing in terms of putting product on the stage. Nonetheless, once you get to the battles, I think they should be fairly comparable. And for the first time, the world champs expanded their battle to top 32 for men.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that backfired. There are only about 45, 47 elims.
Mm.
And so when you're cutting 13 people, that's not so nice for them. I think some of the people who didn't make it was really hard for them, just because it's only a dozen or so of you who
Yeah.
don't advance to the battles, don't get to use your rounds. Someone came and was like, they didn't make it to the battles, and they were just bummed. They were like, I made 10
Yeah.
rounds. I made 10 rounds for this, and I don't get to use almost any of them. That's hard. And I think given the number of people who ended up competing, a top 16 would have been better. With that said, that if they did a top 16, then we never would have gotten my battle of the tournament. JB was crazy. JB versus ABH, battle of, for me at least, battle of the thing. I don't think anybody would agree with me on that, but it was so fun. It was the most fun. Like, again, like I'm not concerned with the highest level of beatbox. I'm concerned with fun, and the two of them
Mm.
combined that super duper fun element with just insane beatbox. So, ABH was the 25th ranked elim, and so it's a
Mm.
top 16. He wouldn't have made it, and he made the top 8. So,
Wow.
it's a give and take. But at the same time, like, except for ABH, it was basically chalk, like the beatboxers you expected to win battles won battles. And when that happens, you got to ask, like, was it even worth it inviting these people who lost 5-0 into battles? And I think that to a certain extent, this is, again, a reflection of the organizational failures of Beatbox Battle TV on this front. They clearly had no idea who among the people who qualified for this event were going to do showcases. I wrote about this
Mm.
the other day. They were calling out people in hopes that they were even in the room, let alone coming up on stage. They would say, so and so, are you here? 3, 2, 1, not here. Okay, wish you the best. Hope you're watching the live stream. Zeka, who like very specifically said, I'm not competing, but was there to support people. They called him up and they said, oh, you're right there. Are you sure you don't want to come? He said, like, I already told you, like, I didn't prepare. I don't want to compete. Like, why are you doing this? And so, on the organizational front, like, it probably would have been better for there to only be 16. And on the same flip side of the same token, there were only top 8 in loops. Loops take a long time, and that went late. But like, there should have been a top 16 in loops. The talent was crazy. The talent was just crazy. Every single battle in loops could have been a final. And I
Mm.
should say, on the beatboxing level front, you just got to give. I mean, whatever. There should be more women and non-binary people on stage at every single beatbox battle. There should have been more women and non-binary people at the World Champs. Nonetheless, you gotta give Bilo credit for having a top 8 battle for women, and the level in that competition was obscene. Just so good. Some of them, I think, top 32 in men, yeah, probably. In a mixed category, I'm not sure some of these men, or let me rephrase. Some of these men would not be in the battles if those women were in a mixed category with them. The level was outrageously high. The style was different, but it was so good. It was so great. And I think a lot of beatboxers who I speak to, when I ask about gender and orientational equity, they say, "Oh, well, it's really important to have a women's battle. It's really important to have a mixed battle," and they think about it in these terms. And frankly, from an outside perspective, I think that's missing the point. Um, you know, beatbox organizers need to be just actively saying, "Let's get more women in the crowd. Let's make sure that they're safe there." Um, you know, that is something that's just not happening. And when you look at only 20 qualified women, only 11 of whom come and do showcase rounds, that's not enough. You compare GBB to this, at least there were women on stage here. When you think about GBB, like, how is it possible that Chihuahua, second in the world in 2018, who lives in the country where GBB is hosted, isn't invited on stage? She didn't win a wild card. Fine, give her a showcase, right? Like, Bilo was always quick to highlight the local community on stage. anybody who did anything. It was a small thing, but if you're local and you're there, Bilo gave you a shout out. The German community was felt, and I know that they felt seen. I didn't speak to too many of them about it, but I know they felt seen. And I think Bilo understood the value of when someone's there, give them credit for what they've done. There was none of that at GBB, and in that regard, the talent was just not there because they didn't even make an effort to have any women on stage. And so when you talk about talent, that's just a non-factor.
Mhm. Okay. Wow. So we have like covered a lot about from like event organizational things to the participants, and how the way you set up the event is going to influence how things turn out in terms of participant skill level, and how it impacts the community as a whole. So I wanted to ask you, what does this World Champs mean for the future of beatbox?
Yeah, I mean that's been my animating question. You and I spoke before the event, and that's my big question. What is the Beatbox Battle World Championship now? Um, it is not the most important beatbox battle in the world. And that is not a value statement. I want to be very clear about that. That's not me saying Swiss Beatbox is better than Beatbox Battle TV. The World Champs is worse than Grand Beatbox Battle. I'm just saying, in terms of influence, in terms of attendance, in terms of views, factually speaking, the Grand Beatbox Battle is the biggest beatbox event in the world. And for many, many years, that was not the case. For many, many years, it went without saying that the World Champs was the biggest event. And I'd say as recently as the last one in 2018, the Beatbox Battle World Championship was still the biggest event in the world. And I think, in many ways, Bilo actively was grappling with that question, moving to a bigger and nicer venue. That was a statement. Investing heavily in his live stream. That was a big statement. I think that really played out well for him. There were, at any given moment, 1,000, 1,500 people in the live stream. I was pulling it up on YouTube. I think the first night's live stream had 34,000 viewers. That's really good, and it was quality. Different things, and I think that was Bilo saying, "I need to match the production value of Swiss Beatbox." He wasn't pleased with me when I wrote that he was taking shots at Poponi, but he was. He said on a number of occasions, people have taken this community to more towards Hollywood, more towards money. That's what he said on a number of occasions. And beatbox has to be about community. He was saying that his philosophy towards what beatbox is and should be is still important. And I think he made a lot of good points this weekend, not with the things he said, but with the things that he created, the community atmosphere, the people that he was able to platform, the way that he really, really, really connected this event to beatboxing history, that he was honoring people who were doing hip hop in the 80s and 90s before most of the people who now call themselves longtime beatboxers even knew what hip hop was. That connectivity to community is a big statement. And so the Beatbox Battle World Championships will never die. Beatbox Battle TV will never die. I wrote that the Beatbox Battle World Championships are dead. The Beatbox Battle World Championships have arrived. And what I meant by that was that what these have been, it's never going to be that. Like I said, there's never going to be 150 solo limbs at World Champs anymore. There's never going to be, just happiness just to be here. The happiness that there is an event that's taken for granted now. The problems that Bilo was solving, he's solved them, and other people have solved them with him. And so he is now reinventing. And I think that this with the expo, this with new categories, this with making a bigger, a continued emphasis on connecting to the history. Bilo has made a very significant statement about, what he thinks the beatbox community is lacking outside his organization. And I'm not 100% sure what his future events are looking like. And I bet my life that he doesn't either. But they will be there and they'll be relevant and important. To whom and for whom, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that the best beatboxers in the world need the world champs anymore. Like Footbox G won. I'm not sure he's the best beatboxer in the world, but he won. He's the world champion now. but it's not like River's going to suffer for losing in the top 4. It's not like Napalm's going to suffer for losing in the top 4, you know? But when I tell you that Bannon, 808 Bannon, needed world champs, I mean that. When I tell you that the young loopers who finally were at their first big event, they needed that, I mean that. You know,
Mm.
when I'm telling you Spanish Beatbox needed the opportunity to showcase their community togetherness, they needed that. And this, for many people, many organizations, many beatboxers, will be a launching point for their career. And so I'm not sure that the world champs is ever going to be the world champs. Sorry, hit the mic. But this is still an enormously impactful and important battle. And I think, you know, for beatboxers who are trying to grow their platform, build their career, you know, the expo, that idea is really important. The idea of being purposeful about beatbox. It's not just learning sounds and building routines. It's about, what do I want to do with this? What does beatboxing look like for me? Is beatboxing for me, you know, I am best served on stage. Am I best served in the studio? Am I best served in the studio recording beatbox only? Am I best served in the studio being a session musician who provides beatbox tracks to other producers and musicians? You know, like when your favorite artist wants trumpet, it's not like they're playing trumpet. They call a professional trumpet player whose job it is to be available to musicians who want trumpet on their tracks, and then they collaborate together, and that trumpet player goes and lays that down for them. You know, are you as a beatboxer someone who can do that with vocal music? You know, and that purposeful thinking about what you want and need out of your career will then influence what events are important for you. You know, if you really need, for booking gigs, a perfect, pristine video that you can use as a resume item, yeah, GBB is probably the best place for you to go. You know, you're going to get a huge crowd. You're going to get a raucous crowd. You're going to get audio technicians that will protect the fidelity of both the audio and video. And that's going to look really nice. You're going to look like you've done a really good gig.
Mm.
But if, you know, you're trying to find other people to collaborate with within the beatbox community, maybe it is the world champs that's better for you. If you are internally building something within the beatbox community and you want a chance to showcase your mini community within the broader community, then yeah, the world champs is probably the place for you. I think, you know, now that the beatbox community is big and it's not going anywhere, beatbox isn't a party trick. People know that. It's not enough to just be good at beatboxing. Now you have to think. I'm not sure, you know, as a journalist, like, I don't know that I need to go to world champs anymore. I'm not sure I need to go to GBB anymore. I've seen that. I've done that, unless they're going to change. And I think as beatboxers and as community organizers, you got to think the same way, you know, like, what is it I'm trying to learn? What is it I'm trying to build? For me, I'm trying to learn about the structures that make it possible for beatboxers to live sustainably. I think that's the animating question for all my coverage. Like, how can someone, you know, fit beatboxing into a healthy life? How can someone make music that they're really proud of? Those are the questions that I answer. And I think, having been at the GBB and having been at World Champs, I now know what those, you know, can do and can't do. I think, you know, having been there once, you know, I can get the rest from the videos, but it's a certain amount of strategic thinking, you know. But at the same time, like, if all your friends are going to an event, that's a good one for you to be at.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm hearing a lot of how we are seeing the community and the perspective of beatbox battles or events, at least beatbox competitions, starting to being seen as more of stepping stones to whatever it is one you want to be. Is if it's a music artist, a teacher, or whatever it is, the exposure afforded by this event is something that is really, really valuable. And this is something that GBB, World Champs, any major competition can offer.
Yeah, I mean, but you also have to be, like, strategic. Like, with all due respect to, like, exposure, getting exposure for your labor is not getting paid for your labor. The prize packs at these things are trash. Like, with all due respect to, you know, the RC505, you know, whatever microphone Swiss Beatbox gets, that's shit. That's really garbage. Artists should be getting paid for these things, and that's not happening right now. You know, go ask Vokoda why he's not at World Champs. I don't know this for a fact. I haven't spoken to him about it. He just told me that he wasn't coming, but, like, if World Champs was paying people who made it to the top 16, I guarantee you he'd been there. Like, he could tell me I'm wrong. He can claim that I'm wrong. But like, if you want artists to take your event seriously, pay them because they're professional musicians. Um, and I don't want people who are beatboxers to think that I'm saying that it's okay to give away your really, really specific labor for free. I don't think
Right.
that that's
Yeah.
healthy. But at the same time, like, this doesn't have to be work for you. This could be, an opportunity to be on stage. At least he told me 100 years ago that, when he goes to a beatbox battle, he thinks of it as a cheat code because he just gets so much better as an artist. And maybe, you don't see this as giving away free labor. You see this as a workshop,
Yeah.
being on stage in a battle is a workshop of your talents, a place for you to really hone the most technical aspects of your craft, and then you can bring it back to whatever else you do, and then say, okay, I'm not going to spam tech at a bunch of corporate people who are paying me $1,000 for a 10-minute set, but knowing exactly the boundaries of your technical ability that you learned at the battle, then you can kind of figure out where that fits in among your other stuff. And so I don't want to say that going to a battle is bad. I don't want to say going to a battle is good. I'm just saying, these are all things that beatboxers should be thinking about.
Right. Yeah. So in short, people should be going to battles with intent, not just for the sake of, hey, battles are the epitome of like being a beatboxer.
Precisely.
So Beatbox Expo has been really beneficial in paving or setting a foundation towards beatboxers on a global scale, seeing beatbox not just as, hey, we come together for battle, but rather, hey, we come together for beatbox and see what it can do beyond what it currently is.
Yeah.
So I think that's really inspiring and a really good move.
One thing I will say that was missing for me in the expo, and frankly was missing throughout the event, was a conception that like beatboxers, it's really hard for people to make a living off of this art, and it's been fairly taboo to talk about that. But there are some people, a lot of people actually, relatively speaking, at this event who make a living off of beatbox, and I would have liked to see that at the expo. And throughout the Beatbox Battle World Championship, there was like a fairly, I'd say, purposeful decision to not think about this event in terms of how it can help people's professional careers. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in speeches Bilo gave before the semifinals and finals of battles, and even during the award ceremonies, he said, this can change your life. And for most champions, that's not true. And considering that Bilo had said, like, beatbox isn't about money, beatbox is about culture, like, he spent most of the week talking about how he is significantly in the hole. He is probably losing anywhere from 15 to 40,000 euros on this event. And he made that very clear. He said that during the event a bunch of times. I think there's this old school conception that money is ugly, and it doesn't have to be. I think a lot of young beatboxers now would like to make a living off of this, not just treat it as a second profession that it's never going to go anywhere. I interviewed Joshua last year, after he blew up, and I asked him, like, are you gonna try to make a living off of music? He said, no, I'm not even gonna think about it. Like, it's not even easy enough to, like, there's no path, there's no blueprint right now, he said. And so, like, in order to do that, he would have to find it himself. And so he's enjoying beatbox for fun, and it will be that way. And I think a lot of beatboxers who are talented enough to use beatbox to be professional, like we said earlier, to be educators, to be some sort of artist, to be a recording artist, those are possibilities, but that wasn't present. And in terms of what you were just saying, in terms of kind of helping people realize their many different visions for what beatbox can be, that was missing for me.
Yeah. And I think a key component here is knowing where to start, because we can know about, like, oh, there are government grants, you have this opportunity. But as someone who's like, oh, I'm 18, for example, like, where do I start with all this? I think maybe having conversations about those in the future would be helpful for these people.
Well, yeah, and I think the brilliance of what Bilo did with this Beatbox Expo was he has just very formally created a space for conversations like this to happen. This conversation didn't happen at the event that happened last week, but this is the platform. More and more beatbox events. You think about Loop Mayhem in Germany. You think about Long Island Beatbox having a barbecue,
Barbecue, yeah.
next month. These events that are specifically built not around battles, but around
Mm,
jamming, around just enjoying. These events that are not just battles. I think give the template for. It's probably good for a beatbox organization to just have a meeting, a weekend where it's like, hey, we're gonna jam, we're gonna be in the same place, but like the majority of this weekend is actually just gonna be we're gonna have sessions. We're gonna, have a conference. It's and we're gonna talk. Someone's gonna come in and tell our other beatboxers, this is how I make money. Someone else is gonna tell their beatboxers, this is how to and not to give a workshop to young students.
mm.
Someone else is gonna say, this is how I got a record deal. Like, has anybody asked Barry Wom how they got a record deal? No, I don't. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that content. But like, there are a lot of beatboxers who I bet would love a record deal. That would make their lives a lot easier. Someone should go to Den and say, "Hey, Den, how did you work with Simon Servita? That's a chart topping producer right there. How did you do that?" Someone should go to Footbox G and say, like, how did you conceive of your double side singles where you do beatbox only and then half beatbox, half produced? Who are these producers that and what Bilo kind of said in hosting this expo is these are conversations that should be happening, and organizers need to be creating that space. I think that's
Mm.
good.
Yeah. Okay, wow. So this has been a really interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing your insights and perspective, especially having gone to events and experienced beatboxing from an observer point of view and a participant in events. I'm really looking forward to the future of beatbox, hearing your experience of the atmosphere there. It's really exciting. I'll be going to GBB 2023, and I'm guessing you'll be there too?
Not this
No?
year.
Oh,
No.
okay. Yeah. Well, I guess I'll be the one who'll be sharing with you guys, whoever's listening in, about what it was like there and maybe giving some insights to what the future holds for beatboxing.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe in
But
the fall I'll be the one interviewing you.
yeah, it's gonna be the other way. So where can we find your work? Where should we go to?
Yeah, for sure. My beatboxing coverage mainly centers on my newsletter, SpeshFX, SpeshFX. And you can find the podcast SpeshFX wherever you get your podcasts or at SpeshFX.com. And you can subscribe to my newsletter, SpeshFX, at SpeshFX.substack.com. And I share all this on social media. The SpeshFX account is just at SpeshFX, but my personal, where I post everything, is at Hate It or Levitt. And I can share that with you to put in the show notes or whatever.
Yep.
I'd also say that, for stories that I think are relevant to people outside the beatbox community, I often don't do it in my newsletter. The things that I write about in my newsletter, I think, are stories that people in the beatbox community will care about and understand, but people outside probably won't. But when there's bigger stories, I do it elsewhere. I've written beatbox stories for Toronto Verse and the Times of Israel and the Forward, and recently the New York Times, which is really exciting. And yeah, you can, I promote all that in the same places, but I think it's important for people to understand, just like beatboxers should be purposeful, I try to be purposeful with my writing about beatbox. Not everything is meant for every audience. If
Mm.
you want to, I came into beatbox journalism to help people understand what this thing is and, how to understand it. I wouldn't send people the newsletter for that. The newsletters for really people who keep up. If your mom is looking for something to explain to her what is beatbox, give her the podcast. The podcast is a really, really nice entry point.
Mm.
If you want to introduce beatbox to someone, I'd say the podcast SpeshFX is a really, really nice place to start. If someone then gets really excited about it and wants to kind of learn the nuances of what is happening, what new things are happening, what trends are happening, or really get in-depth insights into some of the people that I find interesting in the beatbox community, then I think the newsletter is for you. And if I could just say, I'd write about one free newsletter a month, and the rest of it is paid. It's not expensive, but it really makes a difference for me. So if you want to subscribe, that'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I've been like reading your newsletters for a good bit now, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed seeing the different perspectives. You are a journalist, you do your research, you get different voices before you formulate an article, and I really appreciate that kind of work. I think it's much needed in our community. So, Tani, really appreciate your time. Thank you for being on this podcast. It's the Out of the Box podcast. Yeah, I got it right. Where we talk about things that are not usually talked about in the beatbox community. So thank you so much. And I hope you guys who are listening tune into his stuff.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.